if you don't know Ibarionex Perello, he is the host of The Candid Frame, the best photographic podcast that has ever been. Ibarionex, I have listened to, I lost track a little bit of the most recent ones, but I've listened to almost every single one of your 600 plus podcasts, and just an amazing group of conversations that you've had. It is, you've done something for the photographic world that is to be honored. And if there is a Hall of Fame of photography just for doing that alone, you should be in it. But today we're going to talk about your photography. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the photography we're going to look at, and maybe what sort of conversation you would like to have, and the input from our critique group here on the Crit House.
Well, Jeff, thank you for your kind words about the show. Really appreciate that. That means a lot. Okay. This body of work is sort of was jettisoned by Nina's first appearance on the Crit House, when I saw her describing the idea of sort of pairing images in this way. And I had recently consolidated my entire digital archive into a RAID drive, because before they were all over the place. And I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do about this? Because it's stuff going back all the way to about 90, 95, 97, something like that. So I got like 8 terabytes worth of digital files on there. and just trying to sort of make sense about what the hell have I been doing for the last 2 decades. And because much of my photography is always been shaped by the first time I started making pictures at 10 years old, which was this idea of sort of going out, discovering something, and trying to make an image that kind of reflected that joy of discovery, of going ooh ooh ooh, and trying to get an image that kind of represented that. Practically, the images always found a home in either the magazine articles that I was writing or the books I was writing. I never had any sense of themes or ideas or, singular projects that I was working on. And so that's been one of the big obstacles for me in terms of how do I make sense of all these things that I've been doing over the years, because I don't necessarily see a thread through all of them other than the experience I had in making the images. So taking a cue from Nina, what I did is I just went through my archive, and I have it all in Lightroom, and I have images that I have flagged and rated, and I just started pulling images and just kind of throwing them together and seeing what kind of resonated for me. And this is, I would consider, sort of a very first pass at trying to make sense of it. So I guess what I would like to sort of hear is there anything that you're seeing besides, what you're seeing in terms of, the composition, the color, that might be helpful to me in terms of making sense of what I've been doing these many years. I know it's a lot, but that's about as much as I can get out right now.
Well, I listen, Ibarionex, thank you for showing the work and sharing it with not only us, but the audience out there as well. It's great to see your work, and I've seen some of it in addition to listening to you and your interviews for such a long time. I'm gonna have us start with the expert who inspired you to do this project. Nina, what are your thoughts when you see this? What can he learn from you, and what might he do to kick it up a notch?
First of all, I love seeing a different take, and there's so many takes on how you compare photographs. But my immediate response is the ones where you pair something unexpected with your photograph. Like I see the umbrellas, but then I feel like, the spreading of the spikes of the umbrella that have the similarity to the flower. And I feel those are usually the stronger pairs, because I'm, I kind of have to figure out how to read them together, because you purposely put them together, so there has to be a connection. So I'm intrigued to have the scale shift, which I'm always interested in. So, you know, something small and the hand, and how do you connect them? And I really appreciate and I really enjoy that more than when I go to the pair kissing and the pair looking at each other. I almost feel you could put them as individual photos. Like you could have some pairs and then have an individual photo and an individual photo on separate pages. So you kind of get the visual memory of it when you go through the pages. I immediately get the connection, but now I feel if you have a pair of something I can't figure out and then have a page or 2 pages, excuse me, where I have the first pair and then you have the next pair, where you kind of have to go back and forth to figure out the connection, and it gives you a little more of the mystery. And both photos are really strong, so they can be by themselves on a page. You know, like they can hold their own. So I really I enjoy the you know, looking at your photographs, and it's great. And I'm so thrilled I inspired you. I'm honored.
Aristide.
There's some really beautiful images, and what I like though is that you are approaching in each individual picture individually, meaning that you don't feel like you have to be a certain style or point of view or anything like that. And then I feel like in the edit, like for example, these 2 pictures, they come together really nicely in that sense though. But this photograph and for example, the pictures right above, that, you know, and I it's like an ode to Nina picture too, and stylistically, color and palette wise though. But then you have the umbrella pictures too, and that's very different, you know, but it's also cohesive and it works well together too. And I think that is the strength of doing a diptych triptych, is if the pictures work really well together. Now, to me, this is very different stylistically. These 2 photographs are very different than like 22 with the light and the saturation and the geometry. But I think the individual images work well together, and that's the most important thing. And does it work well playing off each other too? So it be a book in a layout point of view, how well does it work, or just presentation like this as a diptych? And that's what I like about your work in this sense, is because I think as photographers, sometimes we just get I love the difference in scale and the detail versus white, the using the palettes. We get a certain lens, a certain distance, we get comfortable. And then the pictures can be completely different, but they all start looking the same. And, you know, I love the blurriness and the smiles in this picture. That shows me the humanity, the emotions, the energy to it. We don't have to have everything shot at 1,000th of a second. And playing that off versus the guy working, and then this relationship, that hand, these little subtle gestures mean everything. And to me, that's really important. And just these 2 pictures also, the colors of the palette between the reds and the blue, and then you have this very grayish brown, but then the little red playing off each other. And I think that's really sophisticated to work with that. And that's done in the editing, but also as a photographer, you're individually thinking when you take these individual pictures, also playing the red, the blue, and compositionally. So I think when we photograph, we don't take multiple pictures, and we don't take a diptych immediately. You know, we take one individual image, and it's just not what's in focus in the center. It's the whole frame, and it's filling the whole frame, not just with content, but also with emotion. And I think that's really important in these pictures. One picture, I love this with the girl and the angle though, but the cheerleader photo, I absolutely love. The girl on that right and the body gesture and how it relates to the others is just really beautiful in that sense. And it's this stark difference to this void of this black, but these little pink ears, and relating to play that off each other. You know, the green is just like the black, it's a solid background. And, while taking those pictures, it's really hard to think about, oh, this doesn't go with that one. But learning to see how different scale and different place can still have the same emotion.
Ibarionex, I remember hearing one of your podcasts at one point. I don't know if it was one of your interviews or when you were talking about photography in general. It was about, or at least what you were talking about, was about gesture. And how the importance of gesture, and that's a big factor in your photography. And when I see your images, I see that so much in what Aristide was saying, and the girl on the right with her gesture of her arm and the way her head is. That seems to be something that runs through a lot of the images, is the importance of gesture in your images. Charis, I know you're seeing these images for the first time, and you're looking at it on a cell phone, so it's small. What thoughts do you have for Ibarionex about this fantastic project he has?
Is this idea of being subtle in the pairing in most of these pairings that makes you want to stay to figure it out, the connection. That's very appealing to me. So, some pictures are more obvious in your face, the connection, and for some of them they need to be examined more. That's something that I think about, and I was curious to hear your perception of the idea of needing time to get the picture, or if it's in your face the second you view it. The idea of which images go together.
Nina, what do you think about with that? When you do think about whether you're giving something too obvious to people, or that you're trying to be subtle about things? And actually Ibarionex as well. When you're putting it up there, do you want it to be an obvious statement, or do you want people to work for it?
I think it should be both, but I usually try to find a connection that you wouldn't have thought about before. Like the I going back to the umbrella with the spikes of the plant. I didn't, that was not something that I would have thought about before. So I kind of like yes, it is spiky, and then where does your story go with that? Or like it's a different type of a diptych, the one with the weightlifter and the group. Like with these two photos, it tells me the story that's being told. I understand the story, and it might not have been spectators, but I create this story that I really like without, I'm not sure if that was a boxing, which it probably wasn't an event, but now this story that emerges is very different than what happened in real life. But I like that you can imagine, or you can create this own imaginary story in combining these two photographs. And this is a different kind of diptych, I feel, because it's not as, graphic but I really love the idea of having these two stories create one big story.
Ibarionex, where do you go with this now that you've done this, right? You've put all these together, and I imagine you did some other ones. Is there something you've learned from it, and does it end up being something that goes somewhere?
Yeah, it was really interesting, because like some of the connections were more obvious than others, and the other ones, like the one that was mentioned about the fellow bringing in the plant, and the women with the umbrellas, that was like a surprise to me. I had the image on the left, and I was just like throwing images next to it, and I looked at that, and I just went, wow, that works. And I think that those were the best moments in this process, because it kind of mirrored the experience I had in discovering the scenes in the first place. So I will likely go through this stuff again with the inclination to sort of have that feeling, rather than just sort of literally going, oh, these two kind of match in terms of color wise. Yeah, that's kind of pleasing, but if I think that I really want to have that sort of visceral experience when I see the images together, rather than just going in my head, oh yeah, that works. Right.
Right.
So I probably will go through this numerous times. And one thing I didn't say was that when I laid them out as diptychs, I was envisioning them as like a book with 2 opposing pages.
So
Okay.
diptych.
No,
So
no, the individual image on the
Okay.
left-hand side and another image on the right-hand side.
Got
So
it.
they could be individual images, but that's the way I kind of sort of looked at it, and I just practically put it there. But the point that Nina made about some of the images being single would likely be the way I would do it in a layout. I wouldn't be married to just doing diptychs throughout, but it helped provide me a sort of starting point in terms of, you know, having like an initial draft of what may eventually come out going forward. So like anything, first drafts are always the most painful one to do. I'm just very grateful that I've been able to get through this. And, you know, I've got to go through, I got like 8 terabytes worth of images on.
Somebody needs an assistant.
But thank you for your insights. It was very helpful.
Well, it is. So this is the interesting thing. I mean, you are a renowned individual in the photographic world, and you have been so kind to take a first draft of a project and show it out there. And for me, that's a fascinating thing to see in the process. So, like, I don't know if anything's going to come of this for you, but it would be very interesting for me to see where you go from first draft to final, and like what it ends up being from one to the next. Because, you know, there's always a process. You know, when Harris started working on his project, I'm sure it was different than it is now. And when Aristide is coming up with the final version of his book, it'll, I assume, vary from what we've just talked about. And I know from previous conversations we've had on the Crit House, we've had folks come in with a rough version, and the final version ends up being recognized in critical mass as a, you know, top 100, and it was a very rough project early on. So that's what's sort of fascinating to me, and I appreciate your willingness to be open about showing a first draft on something that is just in process. So thank you for doing that. Nina, Aristide, Harris, and Ibarionex, it has been a pleasure talking to you these last few weeks here on our critique group, our street critique group. Thank you all for participating, and thank you all for watching the Crit House.
Thank you for having us, Joe.
Thank you.